I love using the analogy of a movie script when it comes to describing our approach to life. We tend to be a script writer for our day to day lives. We predict what's going to happen, we write it as we think it's going to play out. And likewise, we give ourselves a starring role, not just in our own movie, but in everybody else's, and also extrapolate the role of script writer to other people's lives. And I suppose it's part of what we have to do to survive. I mean, our brains are prediction machines, they're expectation machines, they're assumption machines. And this is basically a way of keeping us alive. It's a way of reducing the amount that we have to figure out on a day to day basis. However, that being said, if we're not aware of the way that our brain has a tendency to run, it can lead us to so much disappointment and frustration and anger and sadness, and consequently we go around the place all of the time feeling like we're being let down by others, we're being let down by life because things aren't playing out the way that our script anticipated. And I suppose I love that line that says that any expectation is a resentment waiting to happen. And it's so true. When people don't behave the way that we anticipated or we expected, it goes against our script. It defies our rationality, even though our rationality is based on assumptions and presumptions and expectations. And it really irks us, it can be really upsetting, particularly if it's somebody that's very close to us and we had expectations that are tied into emotions, and all of a sudden our partners, our children, our friends are letting us down, despite the fact that they have no awareness of this whatsoever. And it's about recognizing the way that you think and being very aware of sentences such as they should, or I should, or I assume, or I'm assuming they will. This sort of discourse, this sort of dialogue, this sort of narrative is extremely unhelpful, and as I said, can be the cause of so much conflict, particularly in couples, because there's a complete lack of communication and everything is based on filling in the gaps for each other and just being like, all right, yeah, they're able to read my mind and I'm able to read theirs. And the reality is that's just not true, and the more we give meaning then to these assumptions, the more we emotionally tie ourselves into them, the more likely we are going to get hurt. And it's very unfair then for us to punish others or for us to feel disappointed by others, when the reality is they're just doing what it is that they were always going to do. It's not personal, and we tend to take it personally. We tend to assume that other people nearly are always out to get us, as opposed to seeing that they're living their own lives, and whilst we have a role in their lives, we're not the star. And I know it sounds like as if I'm suggesting that people are somewhat conceited, but it's just the way our brain works. It's not that we're conceited, and in fact, the more that we have I suppose struggled in our early years to feel worthy of other people's attention and other people's love and to have our needs met, the more likely we are to personalize, the more likely we are to assume that other people are going to know what we're thinking, because we've never been given the skills to fully assert what it is that we require. And consequently, we get more and more hurt, our self-worth decreases even further, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. And I suppose there's two things that I would recommend. First of all, radical acceptance, accepting that life is as it is. We don't control it. We can't assume things for other people. We can't assume to know what other people are going to do or how they're going to react. So we just need to be very cautious about listening to the constructs that we have in our mind. We need to be more aware of the expectations that we have and query them every so often, particularly when we find ourselves becoming hurt or disappointed by our expectations. Ask yourself, hang on a second, where did this assumption come from? And if it comes from a manifestation in your head, well, then maybe you need to have a look at why it's hurting you so much, or why you needed this expectation, or why it is that you're so focused on what other people are doing and maybe less focused on what it is that you're telling yourself. Likewise, it's understanding a concept which is called the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. And we tend to have this massive circle of concern, all of the things that we worry about and ruminate about and think about. And yet, when it comes to what we can actually influence, the circle is fairly small, and yet we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on trying to control that outer circle, despite the fact that we never had any control over it to begin with, as opposed to focusing on what it is that we can work on, and that's our circle of influence. And the largest area that we can actually influence is our own internal experience, our own reactions, our own responses, that, kind of, if we can regulate, won't have as much of an impact on us. So if we can recognize that not everything that everybody else does is about us, if we can stop overgeneralizing, if we can stop jumping to conclusions, if we can move away from all or nothing thinking, if we can move away from blaming others and assuming that other people are out to get us based on our past experiences and based on the fact that we have defense mechanisms that we need to work on, then our life is going to be a hell of a lot more peaceful and contented. So it's about learning as much as possible about how you operate as a person, getting to understand the way that your mind works, and then working with that as opposed to working against it, and coming to an assumption that everybody is just out for the greater good. We're all just trying our best. And the more we can work with others as opposed to working against them and making assumptions for them, the better off that we're going to feel, the better off that we're going to be, and the more likely we are to communicate what our needs are, what it is that we expect, and where it is that all of the confusion and I suppose animosity is coming from. If you would like to become more self-aware, if you would like to learn more about how your brain operates and the ways in which it can be your own worst enemy at times, then get in touch with me on my website. It's fundamentals.ie.